It was back to normal at the Japanese Grand Prix as Max Verstappen led a Red Bull 1-2. And I'd like to tell you that there was more to the story, but honestly, there wasn't. The real fight took place behind the two Red Bull cars, but I'm still optimistic for the season ahead, and I'll explain why, as well as taking a look at the Ricciardo and Albon incident, which has divided opinion. Stay tuned for that. The focus of my optimism is around the Ferrari duo of Carlos Sainz and Charles Leclerc. First of all, Sainz had another good race, really solid, having to work his way through some cars after his pit stops, and ultimately ended up in a comfortable third. But his middle stint wasn't actually that impressive compared to Leclerc. His teammate arguably had a more impressive showing. Charles expressed his desire to do a one-stop on the radio, and while other cars around him were struggling with degradation even on the hard tyre, he somehow managed to get the medium tyres to go longer than anyone, and then he stopped for Hadz midway through the race. He ended up in 4th position from his starting position in 8th, and he only finished 5 seconds behind Sainz. Right now, multiple teams are potentially able to challenge Red Bull in qualifying, but it's going to be pretty track dependent as to if they can challenge them during the race. In Australia, a street circuit, I genuinely think Sainz would have challenged Max if not won the race, even if Verstappen hadn't DNF'd. In Suzuka though, the Ferrari was much further behind. If the season carried on right now with no further upgrades for any cars, I do think Ferrari would challenge Red Bull at certain circuits, maybe some of the street circuits we have coming up. But the world of F1 does not stand still, and we have to think about 2 important things. First of all, Red Bull brought upgrades to Suzuka, and these worked as expected, and surely gave them more performance. How much? Well, that's hard to say, but ultimately they improved a car that was already very impressive. Ferrari, on the other hand, have not brought a big upgrade yet, but there's rumoured to be a substantial one coming to Imola, with far more aggressive design compared to what they started the season with. Imola is in 3 races' time. Before that, we have China and Miami, 2 very different races. Are Ferrari the only likely challengers to Red Bull this season? Well, it's hard to say. McLaren looks strong in certain situations and certain tracks, but over a race distance, they're still a way off Red Bull, I think, and even a step behind Ferrari. That's not to say they can't improve, though. Aston Martin have improved their car from the start of the season, themselves bringing a big upgrade to Suzuka, but they're nowhere near the heights of early 2023. Mercedes, on the other hand, well, they're not at the races, are they? Pardon the pun. They're having all sorts of problems. The first race in Bahrain, they ran a new floor compared to testing, and that floor doesn't seem to have given them what they expected. In fact, they've since reverted to the original floor they tried during testing. They've also had to raise the car up a little bit because at tracks like Jeddah, the car was bouncing, and this was making it very unpredictable in the high-speed corners. They've also been experimenting at every race, and apparently will continue to do so to get on top of their issues, because they just don't understand the car. After the Japanese Grand Prix, this is what Toto Wolff had to say. "We have measured the downforce and we see it. We are simply not able to extract it in the lap time, as we should, and as the simulations tell us. The car is so complex in terms of aerodynamic balance and mechanical balance, as well as their correlation. We have followed a certain trajectory in recent years, but without finding a full solution. We got to the point of saying, okay, we have to do something different because by measuring the downforce with our sensors and pressure taps, we have 70 points of extra downforce in a particular curve in Melbourne compared to last year, but we don't see it in the lap time. We leave Suzuka not happy with the result, but with the confidence that we definitely have more to come from the W15. This quote has been misrepresented online a little bit, but essentially Toto is saying that in one curve in Melbourne or one corner, they should have 70 points of downforce, but they don't actually have that 70 points. I find this a little bit hard to believe because 70 points of downforce is a lot. I'd say a team would be very happy if they gained 30 to 50 points of downforce over a winter, and I appreciate he's only talking about one corner, but even still. Regardless, they believe there is more performance in that car if they can get it to respond. But they've said for a number of years now that they're positive that the car has performance. They said that last year, the year before. It's not really transpired. I will say this though, their strategy at Suzuka probably wasn't the best. I don't think they maximized that race. They say they did, but I don't think they did. By their own admission, they perhaps managed too much in the first stint. They were trying to make that one-stop work. Lewis apparently had some wing damage from the restart after the red flag, which is why he let George past him. But after the first stop, both Merc drivers were pretty quick. Lewis was even quicker than George because he kept catching George even though George was racing after Piastri. Lewis kept having really poor stops, poor traffic, which left him adrift of his teammate every time. There was definitely more available for Mercedes, but they're still really far away from where they need to be. I feel as though people have already written this season off as another walk in the park for Verstappen. And you know what? Maybe they're right. I can completely understand that mindset. I think I still want to see a few more races, though, before I completely resign myself to that fact. I want to see if Ferrari can bring anything substantial to the car, maybe before the midway point in the season. And if Mercedes can finally get on top of their issues, maybe later in the season they could compete. Still, it's probably too much to ask for anyone to really compete with Max for the Drivers' Championship this year. He's in great form with a great car, and he keeps getting better, the car keeps getting better. And this year he has a teammate who is actually getting second place behind him, which is a first. Well, it's not a first, but it's a second, but it's a first. You get the point. Okay, let's talk about Ricciardo and Albon and the incident at the start of the race, because it's divided opinion a little bit online. We've got footage from Albon, Ricciardo, and from Stroll, who's on the inside. I think ultimately, it's a first lap racing incident, a really unfortunate one at that. You can clearly see Ricciardo looking in his left mirror, worried about the Aston Martin, when he drifts over to the right, probably not knowing Albon was there in his blindside. Despite some people claiming otherwise, Albon was all the way alongside when he hit the brakes after seeing Ricciardo moving over. Stroll, on the other hand, wasn't actually at the inside of Ricciardo at this point. It is just a really unfortunate incident for Ricciardo. He definitely didn't know Albon was there. Some people have suggested Albon shouldn't have been going around the outside, but what's he meant to do? He's on a faster tyre and he had a much better run. Williams will now be hoping that chassis, the only fully intact chassis, non-repaired chassis, available to them isn't damaged beyond repair, because they won't have a spare one until May. They could end up in a situation where both of their drivers are racing with repaired chassis, which is not ideal. Anyway, we look forward to China. Hope you enjoyed this video, and as always, I'll see you next time.